You're listening to the Corbett Report. CorbettReport.com.
The world is on the verge of global change. The speed of data transmission has increased by multiples of millions. The rate of globally significant events and that of discoveries and crises is growing exponentially. Our civilization is like an uncaptained ship sailing on rough seas with neither chart nor compass, all the while moving faster and faster. The time we have to make the right decisions is shorter and shorter. We are facing the choice to fall into a new dark age, into affliction and degradation, or to find a new model for human development and create not simply a new civilization, but a new mankind. Historic crises show that to break the deadlock, we need technological revolution. It is clear that today's revolution will also require the deepest social transformation. The world's community and leaders should encourage mankind, instead of wasting resources on solving momentary problems, to focus on the technologies of the future: nanotechnology, biotechnology, information technology, cognitive technology, genetics and robotics. Doing so will allow us to find new sources of energy, create fundamentally new architecture and transportation, allow unprecedented developments of human cognitive abilities, refine artificial intelligences and brain-computer interfaces, simulate complex systems, create humanoid robots and cyborgs, and with the help of nanorobots, we may develop manageable matter. Find ways to transfer one's personality to an artificial carrier. Yet what we need is not just another technological revolution, but a new civilizational paradigm. We need new philosophy and ideology, new ethics, new culture and new psychology, and even new metaphysics. We must reset our limits, go beyond ourselves, beyond the Earth and beyond the solar system. This is an adequate response to the challenges of our time. Thus, new reality and future man will arise. Could it happen spontaneously, by itself? Unlikely. Humanity does not have a master plan of its development. It seeks stability. It lives in the present and does not plan. It preserves the status quo and tries to escape development. It does not tend to map future centuries and take responsibility for evolution. In consumer society's culture, there is no evolutionary vocabulary and rhetoric. To break the deadlock, the Russia 2045 movement was founded. It is a mega project intended to reach new heights and meanings. We intend to create a new vector for civilization, aimed at constant human development and evolution. As happened with the mega projects of the last century, the nuclear and the space programs, we integrate the latest discoveries and developments from the sciences: physics, energetics, aeronautics, bioengineering, nanotechnology, neurology, cybernetics, cognitive science. May everlasting spiritual ideals and values help us avoid going astray. Our project will give new meanings to the millions of people on Earth, will become a result of their joint creativity, and will lead us out of the impasse. Away from the murder of nature and physical death, forward to the realm of freedom and creativity, to the depths of the ocean and to the stars, to the infinite universe of our inner world. Our forecast for the next 40 years. February 2012. Global Future 2045 Congress is held in Moscow. It is a debate platform for discussion of our civilization's prospects for development. 2012 to 2013, the global economic and social crises are exacerbated. The debates on the global paradigm of future development intensifies. New transhumanist movements and parties emerge. Russia 2045 transforms into World 2045. Simultaneously, the 2045.com international social network for open innovation is expanding. Here, anyone interested may propose a project, take part in working on it, or fund it, or both. In the network, there are scientists, scholars, researchers, financiers, and managers. 2013 to 2014. New centers working on cybernetic technologies for the development of radical life extension rise. The race for immortality starts. 2015 to 2020. The avatar is created, a robotic human copy controlled by thought via brain-computer interface. It becomes as popular as a car. In Russia and in the world appear, in testing mode, several breakthrough projects. Android robots to replace people in manufacturing tasks. Android robot servants for every home. Thought-controlled avatars to provide telepresence in any place of the world and abolish the need for business trips. Flying cars. Thought-driven mobile communications built into the body or sprayed onto the skin. 2020 to 2025. An autonomous system providing life support for the brain and allowing it interaction with the environment is created. The brain is transplanted into an Avatar B. With Avatar B, man receives new, expanded life. 2025. The new generation of avatars provides complete transmission of sensations from all 5 sensory robot organs to the operator. 2030 to 2035. Rebrain. The colossal project of brain reverse engineering is implemented. World science comes very close to understanding the principles of consciousness. 2035. The first successful attempt to transfer one's personality to an alternative carrier. The epoch of cybernetic immortality begins. 2040 to 2050. Bodies made of nanorobots that can take any shape arise alongside hologram bodies. 2045 to 2050. Drastic changes in social structure and in scientific and technological development. All the prerequisites for space expansion are established. For the man of the future, war and violence are unacceptable. The main priority of his development is spiritual self-improvement. A new era dawns. The era of neo-humanity.
Oh my. Yes, well, if all of this seems familiar as that transhumanist ideal that we've been attempting to expose here on the podcast for many years, then I think you have been paying attention, so give yourself a pat on the back. Very, very worrying stuff indeed, especially worrying that so many people will embrace this without thinking at all about who is directing this transformation of humanity itself and to what end. But some background on this group, the Global Future 2045 group, can be garnered at their website, gf2045.com, which I suggest you explore for some more background about what this group has produced in the past and the types of conferences they hold. But perhaps the best overview of this can be garnered from a very recent article from Infowars.com by Aaron Dykes. United Nations envisions transhumanist future where man is obsolete, which I think gives a good overview of what this is really all about. Although I would, I guess, quibble with the appellation United Nations. As far as I know, this Global Future 2045 group is not themselves affiliated with the United Nations, other than that they will submit a draft of their resolution to the United Nations to demand implementation of their transhumanist ideal of this life extension nanobot avatar technology to merge man with machine and populate the heavens, or something along those lines. And once again, perhaps you would best be served by going and watching the video that accompanies that audio, so that you get a better idea of what it is they're envisioning in a visual sense. And if anyone is not creeped out at least a little bit by this type of video, I think you're probably just not paying attention. And certainly I think my listeners will be well situated to understand what's really being proposed here. It is not the utopia that they're talking about. It is really a nightmare for humanity. And a nightmare that is predicated once again on the very small ruling elite that Lord Bertrand Russell himself and many, many others besides were writing about, as we pointed out at the top of today's podcast, and that they have fully and openly admitted exist, as of course Aldous Huxley did in his famous 1961 speech on the ultimate revolution, or the final revolution, I should say, in which he talked about the ruling elite who have always existed and presumably always will, and how they are using technology to implement a further and more perfect control over humanity, and to direct humanity in the direction they wish. And this is really what they have in mind for their totalitarian world government, and their version of the apotheosis of man that Philip Collins was talking about earlier, in which it is not the perfection of man, as in overcoming all obstacles and perpetuating the species into the heavens so that we can all share in peace and happiness, so much as it is making sure that there is a servile class that will be at the whim of the ruling elite, and that the ruling elite will be the ones to propagate themselves into the heavens and with their exoskeleton shells or whatever it is they're planning. And once again, it sounds ridiculous. It sounds like the type of thing you would laugh at, but again, it's not coming from myself or from the kooky conspiracy theorists. It's coming from organizations like this GF 2045, which includes such famed innovators and scientists as Ray Kurzweil. Surprise, surprise. So once again, check it out for yourself and don't take my word for it. But these are the types of people who are truly planning, scheming, crafting, and attempting to become those rulers of humanity that are really at the base of this agenda for complete social control. Now, to be sure, it is a very, very long way to go between our current lived reality and that vision of the future of downloading our brains into these cybernetic organisms and all of that future fantasy of the transhumanist movement. Then I think it is the sheer size of that gap between what we see around us today and what we are envisioning for the future, or at least some of the elite out there are envisioning for the future. It is the size of that gap which presents the incredulity gap, as it were, for so much of the public out there that doesn't even want to begin thinking about this information and can easily dismiss it by saying, well, that's just sci-fi fantasy. That's so far out there, and that's talking about things that will never happen. And it doesn't necessarily matter how much evidence you present that not only is it likely to happen, it is already happening. There are people out there who will simply dismiss it, even as they take one step by one step into that vision of the future by starting to get on to the 4G mobile, completely immersive world where everything will start to become more and more a virtual reality, even as it's being lived. Well, anyway, as I say, the difference between that 20 or 30 or 40 years in the future outcome versus what we're living through right at the moment presents something of an incredulity gap by which many people will not even bother to look at this information, and they want to know more how this affects us on an everyday level. So it is important to take a look at the nitty-gritty detail of social engineering and how it can actually be accomplished step by step. Quite literally, in this case, in fact, because I'm going to direct your attention to a video, and I won't bother to play the audio because there's really nothing of substance that you can hear. But it's called Piano Stairs, and it's by thefuntheory.com. And it is a very innocuous and perhaps even, well, a laudable idea that's put together by our good friends at Volkswagen, because they love you so much, and it's the Führer's car, so they must be working for the good of humanity. And they have a site called thefuntheory.com, which posits different ways of trying to get people to do things that are good for them by making them fun instead of seen to be a chore. So in Piano Stairs, you can see how Volkswagen, sponsoring the Fun Theory, has created this staircase in Europe, where in Stockholm, where there's a staircase next to an escalator. And when the staircase is a staircase, most people, in fact, almost everyone, takes the escalator because it's easier to do. They're side by side, and people can either walk up the stairs or they can take the escalator. So, of course, they're going to take the escalator. It's just easier to do. So the idea is, how do you get people to change their behavior? How do you get them to take the stairs and thus do a little bit of exercise, and it is something that's good for them in the end. So how do you make them do that more often without any coercion or without any overt advertising campaign or anything of that sort? Well, on the Fun Theory, they take these types of things as little challenges. So they decided to make this staircase into a piano, so that every time you walk on one of the stairs, it makes a note. And it's like, I guess, that scene from Big with Tom Hanks that we can all harken back to, I'm sure, in our childhood or earlier adulthood. And yes, it makes it fun to walk up the stairs because you can make a little song as you do so. And so I'll let you watch that video for yourself. And it's an interesting little idea. And certainly one can see quite obviously how people can be enticed into taking the staircase instead of using the escalators, simply by making it fun to take the staircase. And isn't that a good thing in the end? Well, this is the very, very nitty, tiny, gritty detail of social engineering, and this is a very, very tiny example to be sure, and one that is quite innocuous. In fact, it's almost laudable. Well, certainly, yes, people should probably take the stairs if they can. It's better for them. Why not? And if they can be made to do so simply by making it fun, and if it's sponsored by a loving, wonderful, benevolent corporation like Volkswagen, well, then it must be all for the good of humanity. And unfortunately, though, of course, as we have charted out in this podcast in the past, that is perhaps the beginning of a slippery slope indeed, down to the detail of episode 145 of this podcast, You Are Being Gamed, where we listened to that bone-chilling presentation, the most disturbing presentation ever, which envisioned that every aspect of our daily life may one day be a type of game, and we will be constantly trying to earn points, to earn rewards, or to save money, or to even get tax benefits, or whatever the case may be. And in these tiny little games, you might get points for brushing your teeth, etc. And everything will become a type of game, and this type of fun theory will be used to micro-engineer every single facet of our life. And it's very interesting to see how the piano stairs idea can really start to become something somewhat almost menacing when you start to take it to that extent. Of course, this is very much the idea of more of an Aldous Huxleyan Brave New World type of future autocratic society, where it seems to be all fun and games and happiness, and no one's really being coerced to do anything at the point of a gun, so it must be a good thing. Well, I suppose there is that argument to be made and to be had, but at any rate, let's start to take a look at some more examples of how people can be micro-engineered through the manipulation of their habits. And once again, let's harken back to Edward Bernays, nephew of Sigmund Freud, who, of course, literally wrote the book on propaganda called Propaganda from 1928. And let us once again hearken to the very, very opening sentences of that book. Chapter 1, Organizing Chaos, quote, "The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country," end quote. So once again, I will urge you to read through Propaganda to see how Edward Bernays tackled that problem of organizing the habits and opinions of the masses, certainly a dream of any truly would-be dictator in this day and age. And let's see how that works in some other contexts. And for that, we're going to switch over to episode 51 of the Peace Revolution podcast at peacerevolution.org, wherein our old friend Richard Grove presented a very interesting clip of Peg Luksick called "Who Controls Our Children? How Public Schools Dumb Down Kids." And it is a very interesting glimpse into how social engineering takes place at an institutional level, of course, in the context of the education system that Lord Bertrand Russell was talking about at the beginning of this podcast. And in this clip, well, she draws on an analogy from the corporate sales world, surprise, surprise, to talk about how this dumbing down can take place and, in fact, is taking place. So let's listen to this fascinating clip.
When I began the process, I just didn't like the regulations because I thought, well, they're kind of nebulous and they don't make a lot of sense. And when we started investigating, what we found is that the plan is really very organized and very well put together. The plan is to move education away from what we have right now, which is traditional education. That's, you have so many Carnegie units, you had 4 classes of math and 4 classes of English and so many classes of history to graduate, to what is called outcome-based education. Outcome-based education says that the student must demonstrate something in order to meet the goal and be promoted or graduate. In the traditional system, said this is an A, this is a B, this is a C, this is a D, this is an E, and you fit wherever you fit. Now, you had so much time in order to do that, so, you had 180 days, and then the achievement went up or down according to that. In outcome-based education, the theory is everybody gets an A, or everybody gets a B, and however long it takes you to get there is okay. If you can get there in 3 days, then you graduate in 3 days. If it takes you 10 years, then you graduate in 10 years. Everything rides on the goals and on meeting the goals. So instead of saying the schools will teach, the theory now is the student will demonstrate. And so it's a major shift in the way we look at education. In order to understand that, I want you to think of a telephone salesman. Have you ever gotten a telephone call from a telephone salesman? pick up the phone and the salesman says, hi, he asks you 3 or 4 questions. I'm selling purple shoes tonight, so I want to know, are you a shoe owner? And you say yes or no, and I say, do you like the color purple? And you say yes or no. Do you buy your own shoes, or does your husband buy your shoes, or your wife buy your shoes, or your children buy your shoes, or does some other person buy your shoes for you? And you say yes or no. That's my pre-test. I have just established the baseline data. Now I know where you are, so I can begin teaching you about why you need purple shoes. That's the pre-test. Now that I've established that, I'm going to do my sales pitch, and I'm going to give you 10 reasons why you really, really need purple shoes, and you can't live without them, and you want them. That's the curriculum. I have taught you something. I'm done now. Would you like to put that, Mrs. Smith, on your Visa or on your MasterCard? That's the post-test. I am assessing you to see if you have met my goal or not. My goal is that you're going to buy my shoes. You say, put it on my Visa. You have met the goal. I'm going to say thank you very much, and you may graduate from this conversation, and I'm going to hang up. You say, no. You have not met the goal. I am going to say, well, why not? What is your objection? And you're going to tell me. And I am going to remediate you. I'm going to put you through another sales pitch to make you want my purple shoes. That's remediation. You're going to walk that loop with me one more time, and at the end of the remediation, I'm going to say, should I put this on your Visa or your MasterCard? I'm testing you again. That's a reassessment. If you say, yes, you have met the goal, you may graduate from the conversation, and I'm going to hang up. If you say, no, I'm going to say, what is your objection? And I'm going to remediate you again and test you again. Now, if you would stay on the phone indefinitely, I would keep making you walk that remediation loop until you finally said, yes, you're going to buy my shoes, until you meet the goal. However, in a telephone sales call, you can say, excuse me, I've been remediated enough, I'm never meeting your goal, and you can hang up the phone. A child in a classroom cannot hang up the phone. They are going to be remediated again and again and again and again until they meet the goal. That's outcome-based education. Everything rests on the goals. That's the ladder that everything rests on. So when I started getting involved way back in the fall, I looked at the goals because that's what everything rests on. I thought I'd find geography, history, spelling, reading. I found adaptability to change, ethical judgment, self-esteem, family living, proper environmental attitudes, understanding and appreciating others. And I went and met with Mr. Fear, who's the executive director of the State Board of Education in Pennsylvania, and I said, where did you get these? And with every goal, there was a list of exit outcomes. That's the specific behaviors that the child has to demonstrate in order to prove that they met the goal. The child just can't say, I met the goal, I understand others, isn't that great? The child has a list of behaviors that they have to demonstrate in order to prove that they met the goal. So I said to Mr. Fear, well, where'd you get the goals? And where did you get these exit outcomes? Where did they come from? And he said, oh, we had committees meet all over the state. And we brought together teachers and parents and other groups, and we got together and had consensus forming, and we reevaluated them and redid them, and they came up with over 500 student learning outcomes. And I said, well, okay, what did they base it on? He said, oh, nothing. We developed these specifically for Pennsylvania. I said, well, you mean when they went in and sat down, the table was empty? Oh, no, no. I said, well, what was on the table? Connecticut's goal. Oh, okay. So I wrote to Connecticut and said to Connecticut, would you please send me your goals? And Connecticut did send me their goals. And I sat down, and Connecticut's goals and Pennsylvania's goals were the same goals. Word for word, the same goals. Since then, we've gotten the goals from 26 different states. And this just gives you a little overview of what some of those exit outcomes are and how close they were. All students understand and appreciate their worth as unique and capable individuals and exhibit self-esteem. That's Pennsylvania's. Connecticut. Each student should be able to appreciate his or her worth as a unique and capable individual and exhibit self-esteem. Does that sound familiar? You can take all the student learning outcomes and match them up. It doesn't matter what state you're in. It doesn't matter whose outcomes you're looking at. If you strip the names of the states, you can't tell whose are whose. Now, the other states, they passed their goals and their exit outcomes on the first go-around. Pennsylvania, because of the involvement of parents like you and me and other ones across the state, have been forced to rewrite their student learning outcomes 7 times now. Some of these are from the first set that was first published in September. They published another set on March the 11th. That set included student learning outcomes that said that our children would exhibit the proper attitudes to live in the American constitutional democracy. We don't have a constitutional democracy. We have a democratic republic. The State Board of Education got the form of government wrong. So I went on the radio in Harrisburg and said the State Board of Education doesn't know what their government is, much less what attitudes you need to live in it. So they rewrote those learning outcomes on March the 12th. That set lasted 24 hours. They're in their 7th rewrite now of student learning outcomes, and really, they haven't changed a bit. They've combined some, they've rearranged some, they've reorganized some, but the exit outcomes are still the same.
Once again, Peg Luksick talking about who controls our children, i.e. the outcome-based system of education that has replaced traditional education over the last several decades. And it is interesting to note, if you go and watch that video, certainly that video is, I'm not exactly sure how old, but I would venture to say at least 30 years old, or at least 20 years old, probably older than that. So this is something that has been demonstrably going on for quite a while now, and is obviously starting to bear fruit in the generation that has been raised in such an education system with these outcome-based models. And it's very interesting that she hinged her example there on the telemarketing example, and how a salesman would go through and assign a curriculum for someone to make them understand that they need to buy this company's purple shoes or what have you. Of course, the corporate example is interesting there, because certainly the types of manipulations and tricks that can work on a classroom of students are the same that can then be used to go out and sell to those same classroom of students later on in their lives, often without even really them realizing that they are involved in a sales pitch. And of course, that is always the most effective form of sales pitch, isn't it? So this is an extremely important bedrock issue, and just another example of how social engineering can take place on such a mass scale, at such a bedrock institutional level, and can come to really pervade an entire society, while the parents who would otherwise be interested in their children's education and how that's proceeding can be basically just put off to sleep, and oh, don't worry about your children's education. The state's taking care of it.